I was home alone on a weeknight that felt no different from dozens of others. I had moved into that house less than a year earlier, a narrow two-story place in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to happen. Most nights were still enough that I could hear the clock in the kitchen ticking from the couch. That night started the same way. I came home from work, locked the door behind me, ate something quick, and settled in to watch TV. I remember noticing how calm everything felt. That sense of calm is what made the rest of it sink in so deeply. The house had its usual sounds. The heater kicked on and off. Pipes knocked once in a while. The wind brushed the siding. I knew those noises well enough to ignore them. I checked the doors out of habit, front and back, then went upstairs to change before coming back down. All the lights were off except the lamp by the couch. The windows showed nothing but dark yards and still trees. Around 10, I muted the TV to answer a message on my phone. That was when I heard the first noise. It came from the kitchen, soft and brief, like something being touched rather than dropped. I held still and listened. The house went quiet again. I told myself it was the fridge or the pipes, something normal settling into place. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time it was clearer. A light scrape, followed by a dull tap. It sounded like a drawer being nudged closed without enough force to latch. I felt a small knot tighten in my stomach. I stayed seated, phone in my hand, eyes fixed on the dark hallway that led to the kitchen. I lived alone. No pets. No reason for movement in that part of the house. I stood up slowly and turned the TV volume back on, more for comfort than distraction. The sound filled the living room, making the silence less heavy. I walked toward the kitchen, keeping my steps light. The floor creaked under my weight, louder than usual in the quiet house. The kitchen lights were off. I flipped the switch. Everything looked normal at first glance. Chairs pushed in, counters clear, sink empty. I checked the drawers nearest the sound. They were all closed. Nothing seemed out of place. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening. The house stayed still. I went back to the couch, unsettled but not convinced. I sat down and tried to focus on the show again. My attention kept drifting. Every small noise pulled my focus back to the hallway. The sense of being alone felt thinner now, like it could tear if I pushed it. Not long after, I heard footsteps. They were faint but real. A slow shift of weight followed by another. They came from upstairs. My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. I stared at the staircase, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was the house settling, the way old buildings sometimes do. But these had rhythm, direction. I muted the TV again and stood up. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing against my ears. I listened closely. Nothing moved. I stood there long enough that my legs started to ache. I told myself if someone was there, they would have made more noise. I told myself I would have noticed something earlier. I took a step toward the stairs, then stopped. The feeling in my gut was strong enough to make me pause. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no alerts, just the time ticking forward like nothing was wrong. Then I heard the sound again. This time it was closer. A floorboard creaked at the top of the stairs. Not loud, but deliberate. My breathing turned shallow. I realized then how exposed I was, standing in the open with lights on, making no effort to hide. I backed toward the front door, slow and quiet, keeping my eyes on the stairs. I reached behind me and felt for the lock without looking away. My hand shook as I turned it. The click sounded too loud. I waited for something to happen, for footsteps to rush down the stairs, for a door to slam, for any sign that I was not imagining this. Nothing came. I stood there for a long time, frozen in place, listening to my own heartbeat. When I finally worked up the nerve to move again, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness as I edged toward the stairs. Each step up felt wrong. The house seemed to hold its breath with me. At the top, the hallway stretched out, doors closed, shadows thick along the walls. I swept the light slowly, checking each doorway. Bathroom empty, office untouched, bedroom door closed. Pushed it open. The room looked normal until I noticed the closet. The door was cracked open. I never left it that way. I stood in the doorway, light trained on the gap, waiting for movement. I crossed the room and pulled the door open the rest of the way. The closet was empty. Clothes hung neatly. Nothing disturbed. No place to hide without being seen. Relief hit me hard enough to make my knees weak. I laughed once under my breath, more from release than humor. I told myself I had scared myself for no reason. Stress, fatigue, too much quiet. I went back downstairs and locked myself in the living room, deciding to wait it out. I sat there with every light on, phone in my hand, counting the minutes until I felt steady again. That was when I noticed the back door. It was unlocked. I knew I had locked it earlier. I remembered the feel of the bolt sliding into place. Seeing it turned the wrong way made my skin crawl. I stared at it, unable to move, replaying my evening in my head. I had checked it. I was sure. I locked it again and pressed my ear to the door. Outside was quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the distant sound of traffic far away. I did not sleep that night. I stayed on the couch until morning, lights blazing, every sound setting my nerves on edge. The next day, I called a locksmith and had every lock replaced. While he worked, he found something that explained everything. The back door frame was warped. The lock had been catching, not fully setting, even when it felt secure. With enough pressure, it could be opened from outside without forcing it. Later that week, I spoke to a neighbor and learned that someone had been reported entering unlocked homes nearby, testing doors late at night, moving quietly, leaving when they thought someone was awake. Nothing had been stolen, nothing damaged, just presence. The idea that someone could have been inside my house while I sat watching TV made my stomach turn. That I might have scared them off without ever seeing them left a deeper mark. It explained the noises, the footsteps, the open closet, the unlocked door. There was no mystery left, no unanswered question, just the clear understanding that I had not been alone, and that the only reason it ended without confrontation was timing. I moved out a few months later, not because the house was unsafe, but because I could no longer relax there. Every quiet night felt tense. Every sound felt loaded. The memory stayed sharp, a reminder of how easily normal life can be interrupted, and how thin the barrier is between safe and vulnerable when you are alone and least expecting it. I was alone in the house for the first time since moving in, and I remember thinking it would feel freeing. The place was small, a single level with an attic crawl space, built sometime in the late 70s. Creaked more than newer homes, but nothing about it felt dangerous. I had spent the first few weeks getting used to the sounds and routines, learning which noises belonged to the house and which ones belonged to outside. That night felt settled, quiet, and predictable. I had locked the doors after dinner and pulled the blinds down before turning on the TV. The neighborhood was calm, the kind where porch lights stayed off and dogs rarely barked. I sat on the couch with my phone nearby, half watching a show and half scrolling without really paying attention. The air inside felt still, warm from the heater cycling on and off. Sometime after 10, I noticed the house go quiet in a way that stood out. The heater stopped running. The fridge went silent. Even the distant traffic seemed to fade. That kind of quiet always made me more aware of my own movements. I shifted on the couch and heard the cushion release air. I cleared my throat and felt the sound echo faintly. That was when I heard something above me. It was not loud. It sounded like a soft drag, then a pause, then another. It came from the ceiling, closer to the hallway than the living room. I muted the TV and listened. The noise stopped. I waited, counting my breaths, telling myself it was the house cooling down or a branch brushing the roof. A few minutes passed. I almost turned the volume back up when it happened again. This time it was clearer. A slow scrape followed by a dull thump, like weight shifting carefully. My stomach tightened. The attic ran across the entire house, accessible through a panel in the hallway ceiling. I had been up there once while unpacking boxes. The space was low and dusty, with loose boards laid across the beams. I sat perfectly still and listened harder than I ever had before. The sound moved, inch by inch, stopping for long stretches. It was not random. It followed a path. I told myself it could be an animal. Raccoons were common in the area. Mice got into attics all the time. That explanation should have settled me, but it did not. The movement was too slow and measured. It felt deliberate. I stood up and walked toward the hallway, keeping my steps light. The sound stopped as soon as I moved. I froze, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The drywall looked the same as always. No cracks, no movement, nothing visible. I backed into the living room and sat down again, forcing myself to breathe evenly. I picked up my phone and checked the time. Just after 10:30. Too early for exhaustion to play tricks on me. Too late for someone to be doing work nearby. The noise started again, closer now. I could tell by the way it traveled through the beams. It was above the hallway, then shifted toward the bedroom. Each sound felt closer to me, like the space between us was shrinking. I realized then how exposed I felt. Thin ceiling, hollow doors, no one else in the house. I stood and turned on every light I could reach. The brightness helped, but it did not make the noise stop. I walked into the hallway and stood directly under the attic access panel. The sound paused, then continued, slower than before. I imagined someone lying flat up there, moving inch by inch to stay quiet. The image settled into my mind and refused to leave. I grabbed my phone and held it tight, thumb hovering, unsure who to contact or what to say. I did not want to overreact, but I could not ignore what I was hearing. The sound moved again, directly above the living room now. The ceiling vibrated faintly, enough that I felt it more than heard it. Then something fell. It was light, barely more than a tap, but it landed in the hallway behind me. I turned fast, heart racing. A small clump of insulation sat on the floor beneath the attic panel. Dust floated in the air, catching the light. That was the moment fear took full hold. There was no animal explanation that fit anymore. Insulation does not fall without being disturbed. I backed into the living room and positioned myself near the front door, phone raised, eyes never leaving the hallway. The sound above me stopped completely. The silence that followed felt worse than the noise. I waited, tense, every muscle tight, listening for any sign of movement. Seconds stretched long enough to feel unreal. Eventually, I heard a final sound. A slow, careful shift, then nothing. I left the house and did not go back inside that night. I sat in my car across the street, watching the dark shape of the house, waiting for lights to turn on or doors to open. Nothing happened. The house stayed still. The next morning, after daylight made the place feel less threatening, I returned with help. The attic was checked thoroughly. There were clear signs of recent movement. Boards displaced, insulation pushed aside, footprints pressed into the dust that did not belong to me. The explanation came later, and it was clear, grounded, and unsettling in a different way. The previous owner had hired a contractor months earlier to repair wiring in the attic. That contractor had kept a copy of the key. After the house sold, the key was never returned. There had been reports of break-ins tied to someone entering homes without forcing doors, using old access, moving through attics to avoid being seen. Nothing was stolen from my house. No damage beyond the attic disturbance. The person likely believed the place was empty and left when the lights came on. The locks were changed that day. Security was added. The house was made safer in every way that mattered. The situation had a real cause and a clear end. What stayed with me was the memory of lying on the couch, unaware, while someone was above me, moving slowly, listening just as closely as I was. Knowing it was real did not make it easier. It made it harder. I sold the house less than a year later. Not because it was unsafe, but because I never shook the feeling that the ceiling was thinner than it looked, and that being home alone does not always mean being alone at all. A couple years back, I was living alone in a small ground floor apartment at the edge of town. It was one of those places that felt temporary even after months. Thin walls, old locks, windows that never felt fully sealed. I had gotten used to the normal sounds of the building at night, the pipes shifting, a distant car, someone closing a door down the hall. Those sounds had patterns. That night broke every pattern I knew. I went to bed late, I remember checking the time before I fell asleep because I had work the next morning and felt annoyed at myself for staying up. The apartment was dark except for the dim orange light from the street lamp that always leaked through the blinds. I locked the front door the same way I always did. I checked the deadbolt. I remember that clearly because I had a habit of touching it twice before turning away. Nothing felt off. Nothing stood out. Sometime later I woke up without knowing why. My eyes opened before my thoughts caught up. My room was dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy rather than calm. I was still half inside sleep when I noticed movement at the doorway. A shape passed from left to right, slow and steady, blocking the faint light from the hall for a second. It looked like a person walking past my door. My first thought was lazy and wrong. I assumed my boyfriend had come over, even though that made no sense. He did not have a key. He never showed up unannounced. My brain reached for the safest answer because I was still fogged with sleep. I felt mild confusion, not fear. I remember thinking I must have slept through the door opening. I lay there for a few seconds waiting for another sound. There was nothing. No footsteps. No shifting floor. No familiar noises that would confirm someone I knew was there. The silence pressed harder. My heart started to speed up, slow at first, then faster as the fog lifted. I called out without thinking. The sound of my own voice surprised me. It sounded thin and wrong in the dark. There was no response. The quiet stayed flat and empty. That was the moment my body woke up fully. A cold feeling spread through my chest and down my arms. I knew it was not him. I knew no one I trusted would ignore me like that. I sat up and listened. Still nothing. No movement. No breathing. The part of me that wanted answers pushed me out of bed before the part that wanted safety could stop it. I did not grab my phone. I did not take anything with me. I walked to the bedroom door barefoot, every step careful, trying not to make noise even though the floor creaked anyway. The hallway light was on. I never slept with it on. That detail landed hard. The light was bright and steady, not flickering, filling the front room with a flat glow. My stomach dropped. I stood there for a second, hand on the doorframe, telling myself to stay calm while my pulse hammered in my ears. I stepped into the hall and moved toward the front room. The apartment smelled the same as always. Nothing was knocked over. Nothing looked disturbed. That almost made it worse. The space felt occupied in a way I could not explain, like the air itself had weight. He was standing near the far wall, facing it, close enough that his shadow stretched long and warped across the paint. He was a stranger. That registered instantly. He was taller than me, wearing dark clothes that looked worn and out of place indoors. His posture was stiff. His arms hung at his sides. He was not touching the wall, just staring at it as if something was there that I could not see. I froze. My mind scrambled, trying to process how a stranger could be standing in my apartment at that hour. I looked at his hands, his shoulders, his stance, searching for signs of danger. He did not turn when I moved. He did not react to my presence at all. That lack of reaction scared me more than if he had moved toward me. I asked who he was. The words came out small and uncertain. He did not answer. He did not shift or acknowledge me in any way. His stillness felt unnatural, like he was not fully aware of where he was. Fear finally took over, clear and sharp. Every instinct screamed that I was not safe. The distance between us felt huge and fragile at the same time. I imagined him turning suddenly. I imagined him blocking my way. I imagined not making it back to my room. I backed away, slow at first, then faster as panic took hold. I turned and ran down the hall, my feet slapping against the floor, my breath loud and uneven. I reached my bedroom and grabbed my phone from the bed with shaking hands. I did not stop to lock the door. I did not stop to think. I ran straight for the front door and out into the night. The cold air hit me hard. I stood barefoot on the concrete, phone pressed to my ear, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what was happening. I kept looking back at the apartment door, half expecting him to step outside after me. The building was quiet. A few lights were on in other units, but no one else was outside. I felt exposed and small. The police arrived quickly. The sound of the sirens was grounding. Their presence filled the space with authority and order. They went inside while I stayed outside. Wrapped in a blanket one of them handed me. My whole body shook, not from the cold, but from the release of fear now that I was not alone. They found him exactly where I had left him, still standing near the wall, still unresponsive. It took time and careful handling to get him to move. They later told me he was mentally ill and confused, not aggressive, not aware of the danger he had caused. He had no weapons. He had no clear explanation for why he was there. The apartment was searched thoroughly. Every window was checked. The door showed no signs of forced entry. The lock was intact. Nothing was broken. Nothing was missing. That detail has stayed with me more than anything else. To this day, neither I nor the police know how he got in. There was no simple answer. No loose latch. No open window. No evidence left behind. After he was taken away, the officers walked me through the apartment. The space felt smaller, stripped of safety. Every shadow looked wrong. Every sound made me tense. They stayed until I felt calm enough to sit down. They gave advice. They wrote reports. They left. I did not sleep that night. I sat on my bed with the lights on until the sun came up. When morning arrived, it felt unreal, like the world had moved on too easily from something that had nearly broken me. I changed the locks later that day. I added extra security. I moved out not long after. What stays with me is not just the fear, but the quiet. The way he walked past my door without a sound. The way he stood there, detached from everything around him. The way my mind tried to protect me by choosing a harmless explanation until it could not anymore. Nothing supernatural happened. There was no warning sign, no dramatic noise, just a stranger in my home at 3 a.m. and no clear reason why. That is what makes it hard to forget. I learned how thin the line is between safe and unsafe, how fast normal life can crack open, and how sometimes there is no answer that makes sense, only the relief of surviving and the weight of knowing it could have gone very differently. A couple years back, I was still living at home, working afternoon shifts that started late enough for mornings to feel slow and stretched out. That day was supposed to be ordinary. I remember going to bed late the night before and letting myself sleep in because I did not need to leave the house until much later. When I woke up, the room felt warm and stale in the way it always did when the sun climbed high enough to hit the roof. I checked the time and saw it was just after 10 in the morning. Too early to get ready, too late to fall back asleep. I stayed in bed and turned on the TV, letting familiar noise fill the room. American Dad played quietly while I stared at the ceiling, half watching, half drifting. The volume was low, just enough to break the silence. The rest of the house felt empty. No voices, no movement. My mom had already left for work, and I knew no one else was supposed to be home for hours. That knowledge sat comfortably in the back of my mind, unquestioned. The house itself was old and creaky, the kind where sounds traveled easily but also blended into normal background noise. We only ever used the back door. The front door might as well have been decoration. Everyone came and went through the back, straight into the kitchen, up the stairs, or down the hall. Because of that, the sound of the back door opening never meant danger. It meant routine. It meant family. When I heard the back door open, I did not react at all. The sound registered, then passed. I assumed my mom had forgotten something and come back. I stayed in bed, eyes on the TV, body relaxed. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps, heavy ones moving across the kitchen floor. Still normal, still unremarkable. Then the footsteps hit the stairs. The stairs were loud. Every step had its own groan, a slow climb upward. That was when my attention shifted fully away from the TV. Something about the timing felt off. My mom never came upstairs if she was just grabbing something. She moved fast, purposeful. These steps were steady and slow, like someone taking their time. I called out toward the hall without sitting up. My voice sounded casual to my own ears. I expected an answer. I expected the sound of keys or a bag being set down. I got nothing. The footsteps continued. I sat up in bed and muted the TV. The house felt different without the background noise. The silence was sharp now, broken only by the stairs complaining under weight. I told myself there was a simple explanation. Maybe someone else came home early. Maybe plans had changed. Even as I thought it, I knew it did not fit. The steps reached the top of the stairs. I watched my bedroom door, waiting for it to open all the way. Instead, it cracked open just enough for a face to appear. It was not a face I recognized. A man leaned into the doorway, stopping short the second he saw me. He looked around 30, maybe a little older, with a blonde beard that was uneven and thick. His hair was long, greasy, and wild, hanging around his face in a way that looked unwashed. His eyes widened when they met mine. That moment stretched longer than it should have. I was sitting upright in bed wearing only boxers. I was young, big, and half asleep, but fully awake now. I was 6'3" and heavy at the time, broad enough that I probably looked more intimidating than I felt. The man took all of that in quickly. I could see the calculation happen on his face. Surprise, confusion, something close to alarm. He spoke, asking if this was a certain residence, the name wrong, unfamiliar. His voice sounded uncertain, like he already knew the answer before it left his mouth. I told him it was not. The words came out automatically, without thought. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He pulled his head back and closed the door halfway as he stepped away. I heard his feet moving fast down the hall. Then the stairs. Then nothing. The entire encounter lasted seconds. Took longer for my brain to catch up. I sat there frozen, heart pounding, trying to understand what had just happened. A stranger had been inside my house. He had climbed the stairs. He had opened my bedroom door. The weight of that fact settled slowly. Then all at once, I jumped out of bed and pulled on the first clothes I could grab. My hands shook as I moved to the window that overlooked the driveway. I expected to see him there, fumbling with a car, hesitating, looking back. The driveway was empty. The street was quiet. There was no sign of anyone leaving. I ran through the house, checking rooms, checking locks, checking the back door. It was closed, not damaged. Nothing looked disturbed. No drawers open, no cabinets moved. It was as if he had never been there at all. The adrenaline took time to fade. When it did, it left behind a deep unease. I replayed the scene over and over, noticing details I had missed at first. The way he moved like he knew where he was going. The way he did not call out when he entered. The way he did not react until he saw me. That look of surprise told me he had expected an empty house. Later that day, after my mom came home, I told her everything. We walked the house together. We checked doors and windows again. Nothing explained how he got in or why he chose our place. That night felt heavier than usual. Every sound outside made me tense. Sleep did not come easily. A few days later, I talked to a family friend who had been a police officer for years, a veteran who had seen enough to speak plainly without exaggeration. After hearing what happened, he told me this was not an accident. There had been reports in nearby towns of a man using this exact approach, entering homes during the day, acting lost if confronted, asking about the wrong address, leaving quickly once he realized someone was home or too much trouble. The goal was simple. He targeted houses he thought were empty. He relied on routine sounds like doors and footsteps blending into normal life. If no one responded, he stayed longer. If someone appeared, he played confused and left before things escalated. Hearing that explanation made everything click into place. The timing, the confidence, the quick exit. It was not random. It was practiced. What stuck with me most was how close it had been. If I had slept longer, if I had worn headphones, if I had been in the shower, the house would have been empty in his eyes. I would have come downstairs later to a very different scene. Nothing violent happened. Nothing was taken. No one was hurt. But the sense of safety I had in that house never fully returned. I learned how easily normal sounds can hide something dangerous. How routine can be used against you. How a quiet morning can turn sharp in seconds. That man never came back. We never saw him again. But for a long time after, Every time I heard the back door open when I did not expect it, my body reacted before my mind did. I would feel my chest tighten, my focus snap into place, alert in a way I had never been before. The situation ended cleanly. The explanation made sense. The threat passed. What remained was the understanding that being home does not always mean being safe, and that sometimes the most unsettling moments are the ones that end quickly, leaving you alone with the knowledge of how easily things could have gone wrong. I was 19 and living at home while attending a local college. That week, my parents left before sunrise to drive my younger sister to a regional hospital 2 hours away. She had complications after surgery. They did not want me missing classes or falling behind, so I stayed behind to watch the house. The list was short and practical. Keep the heat steady. Feed the dog twice a day. Let faucets drip when the temperature dropped. Check the basement pipes each night. The weather was cold enough that mistakes could turn expensive fast. The house had been built in the 1950s. It was solid but tired. The floors creaked from age, not damage. The walls held heat well if the furnace behaved. The back half sat over a shallow crawl space that had always made me uneasy. My dad warned me never to open it. He said the insulation dust was bad for lungs and that raccoons had once nested there. The access door was a square panel low on the wall in the laundry room. It sat just above the floor, painted the same dull white as the wall, with a small metal latch that always felt stiff. The first day passed without trouble. I went to class, came home, fed the dog, and checked the thermostat. It was set where it always was. That night, I watched television until I felt tired enough to sleep. The house made its usual sounds. Pipes ticked as they cooled. The furnace hummed, shut off, then came back on. I woke after midnight because the house felt too warm. The air felt dry and heavy. The heater kicked on again almost right away. I checked my phone and saw the time. It was 1:12 a.m. I stepped out of my room to adjust the thermostat. When I crossed the kitchen, I felt heat through the floor near the vent by the cabinets. It was stronger than usual, like someone had aimed a space heater up from below. I bent down and held my hand over the vent. Warm air rushed out hard, then stopped. The furnace shut off. The house went quiet. I told myself old systems behave strangely when it is cold. I turned the thermostat down 1 degree and went back to bed. Sleep came in short pieces. The heater kept cycling, on off on again. Each time it started, I woke. I checked the time again later and saw 2:40 a.m. I took the dog outside because he had been restless, pacing the hallway. The back porch light cast a weak circle over the yard. Snow covered the ground in uneven patches. I opened the door and waited for him to step out. He froze on the threshold. His body stiffened. His ears flattened against his head. He stared into the dark behind the garage where the yard dipped. I tugged lightly on his collar. He refused to move. After a long moment, he backed away from the door and stood shaking. I closed the door and locked it. I did not force him outside. I told myself animals act strange at night. I checked the doors and windows before returning to bed. All were locked. The basement door was shut tight. The crawl space panel looked the same as always. I did not sleep much after that. The next morning, I noticed muddy marks on the laundry room floor. They were faint and partial, like the edge of a shoe brushed across the tile. I tracked them to the crawl space access door. The latch was bent outward, not broken, but warped, like someone had pulled from the other side. My chest tightened. I knelt and wiped a finger across the marks. The dirt was still damp. I stood there for a long time. I had not opened that door in months. I knew that for certain. I had no reason to. I did not store anything there. I checked the rest of the house again. Doors locked, windows secure, nothing missing, nothing disturbed. I went to class with a tight knot in my stomach. I returned early and brought the dog inside before dark. I kept every light on. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to the house breathe. The furnace continued its short cycles. I checked the thermostat again. Same setting. I checked the basement. Pipes looked fine. No leaks. No signs of entry. The basement windows were small and high, blocked by snow from outside. I avoided the laundry room. When I finally forced myself to look again, the crawlspace door looked wrong. The bottom edge had fresh scuffs. The paint was scratched near the latch. I grabbed a flashlight and crouched low. I did not open it. I shined the light along the edges. Mud had been smeared along the inside seam. That night, I could not relax. I sat on my bed with the dog pressed against my legs. The heater came on again. The warmth through the floor returned, stronger near the kitchen vent. I walked out and felt it with my bare foot. The floor was warm in a way that did not make sense. Heat rises. This felt focused, local, like something close to the surface. I went to the basement and followed the duct line toward the back of the house. The metal vibrated softly. I noticed the furnace intake filter cover was not seated right. It was shifted, crooked. I knew how it should look. My dad had shown me how to replace it. Pulled it out. The filter was dirty, darker than it should have been. It smelled faintly sour. The inside of the intake had streaks along the metal. I stood there until my legs went numb. The intake filter could only be moved from inside the crawlspace. There was no other access. The realization landed slowly and then all at once. Someone had been under the house, not passing through, staying long enough to breathe the same air, long enough to feel the heat and adjust to it, long enough to watch. I locked myself in my room and stayed awake until morning. The dog did not sleep. He stared at the door. At first light, I called my parents and told them everything in simple terms. I did not try to soften it. They told me to leave the house and go to a neighbor. I packed a bag and did not look back. Later that day, my dad returned with a local contractor and a sheriff's deputy. They opened the crawlspace with masks on. The crawlspace showed signs of recent use. A flattened path through insulation. Food wrappers pushed into a corner. A blanket dragged in from somewhere else. The deputy said it looked like someone had been using it to stay warm during the cold nights. They found a gap behind the shed where the crawlspace vent cover had been loosened. The snow had hidden the disturbed ground. The person had likely been watching the house for days, waiting for it to empty. The hospital trip gave them the time they needed. The heater cycling had been caused by blocked airflow when the intake was shifted. The warm floor was from body heat and a blocked vent trapping warmth below. The person was never found. The deputy said that was common. Transient use, quick exits, no fixed trail. My parents had the crawlspace sealed and the furnace serviced. Cameras were installed. The house felt different after that. Smaller. Watched. I moved out a few months later. I still think about that filter sometimes. About how close it had been. About how breathing sounds disappear into the noise of a house. About how warmth can mean safety or danger depending on where it comes from. I took the job because it paid cash and I needed it fast. My aunt mentioned it over dinner, said a coworker needed someone to watch their house for 4 nights while they were overseas. Sounded simple. No pets, no cameras. Lock the doors at night. Water the plants once a day. Sleep there so the place looked occupied. The pay was more than I made in a week at my part-time job, handed over in an envelope before they left. The house sat alone at the end of a gravel road that curved off a county highway and disappeared into dry oak trees and scrub. The drive-in felt longer than it was because there were no other houses past the first bend. Just fencing, rusted gates, and land that had not been touched in a long time. The trees were thin and twisted, their branches scraping together when the wind moved through them. The yard was bare dirt and rocks. No grass, no noise except insects and the wind. Inside, the house was clean and spare. Everything had a place and stayed there. The floors were swept. The counters were clear. The air smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. There were no personal photos out, no signs of kids, no clutter. The windows were small and placed high, like the house was meant to look out without being seen. The back deck faced open land. That was the only place I could get cell service if I stood near the railing and held my phone at chest height. The first night felt fine. I cooked a simple meal, walked through each room, locked the doors and checked the windows. I watered the plants and sat on the couch until I felt tired. The house made normal sounds. Pipes shifted, wood settled. I slept through the night without waking. The second night felt different from the start. The quiet pressed harder. The wind died after sunset, leaving the trees still. The dark outside the windows looked solid, like a wall. I locked up early and went to bed with a light on in the hallway. I woke suddenly at 3:03 a.m. The time burned into my memory because I checked it more than once. The sound came from above me, heavy movement across the roof. Not scratching, not scurrying, weight shifting slowly, deliberately. Pause. Then another step. It sounded like someone testing where to place their foot. The roof creaked in a way that made my stomach tighten. I lay still and listened. The movement stopped, then started again near the edge of the house. I waited for it to slide or scramble. It did not. It moved with control. After a minute, it stopped completely. I stayed awake until morning, telling myself it was an animal, even though it did not sound like one. The third day passed slowly. The sun felt harsh and flat. I walked the property during daylight and found nothing out of place. No ladders, no disturbed dirt near the house, no branches broken near the roofline. Everything looked the same. At 6:40 p.m., I checked the breaker panel because the kitchen lights flickered. Several switches were down. The ones for the outside motion lights were off. I knew I had not touched them. I had not gone near the panel since the first night. I stood there staring at the labels, feeling the heat rise in my face. I flipped them back on and went outside to test the lights. They came on as expected. Bright, sudden, exposing the yard in hard white light. That night, I locked the doors and sat on the couch with all the lights on. The house felt smaller. The ceiling felt lower. I tried to distract myself, but every sound pulled my attention back. The wind returned after midnight, pushing against the walls. Branches tapped the siding. I went to the bathroom before bed and froze halfway across the tile floor. A sound came through the vent above the shower. Breathing. Slow. Even. Patient. Not rushed. Not strained. Paused. Then continued, like someone listening for a response. It was too controlled to be an animal. Too steady. I stood there until my legs hurt, counting the breaths without meaning to. I backed out of the bathroom and shut the door. I did not sleep. I sat on the bed with my back against the wall, watching the doorway. The breathing stopped at some point. I did not hear movement after that, but the silence felt watched. When the sun came up, I packed my bag without turning my back on the hallway. I unlocked the front door and stepped outside. As I pulled it shut, something shifted above me. The attic access panel in the hallway moved slightly. A thin line of dust fell from the seam and drifted down into the light. I stood there staring at it until the dust settled on the floor. I left without locking the door and drove straight to the highway. My phone showed signal bars as soon as I reached the pavement. I did not go back for the last night. I did not tell them why when I returned the key in an envelope. Later, after enough time had passed that I could think clearly, I put the pieces together. The breaker panel was inside the house, but the main shutoff for the motion lights ran through an exterior conduit that could be accessed from behind the storage shed. The roof access was easy from the oak tree closest to the house, its branches thick and low. The attic stretched over the bathroom and hallway, with vents that carried sound clearly into the rooms below. Someone had been using the attic to move through the house without being seen. They shut off the lights so they could approach at night without being exposed. The roof noise was them testing weight and balance. The breathing was close because they were close, separated only by drywall and a vent cover. They waited for me to leave so they could avoid being seen. The owners returned a week later. A contractor found disturbed insulation in the attic and boot prints near the access panel. Nothing was stolen, nothing damaged. The house had been used, not robbed. The gravel road made it easy to come and go without notice. The isolation kept questions away. I took the cash and never asked for more work like that again. Some houses do not want witnesses. Some places are quiet because someone makes sure they are. I moved into the rental because my lease ended with no warning and I did not have many options. The landlord accepted the deposit without questions and said the place had been empty for a while. That explained the dust on the shelves and the stale smell that clung to the walls. It was an older house split into 2 units, mine on the ground floor. Cheap paint, thin doors, one small attic crawl that was sealed shut with a screwed panel in the hallway ceiling. The first week passed quietly. I unpacked slowly, keeping my routine tight. Work, eat, sleep. I wiped down surfaces, opened windows during the day, and let the place air out. The smell faded but never fully left. It stayed in corners and closets, faint and sour, like old fabric left too long in a closed box. I blamed age and moisture. The second week was when things started to feel off. Nothing dramatic, just small shifts. A chair at the kitchen table turned slightly toward the counter when I was sure I had pushed it in straight. A bathroom door closed when I remembered leaving it open. A cabinet under the sink left cracked just enough to notice. Each time, I paused and replayed the moment in my head. I told myself stress was doing it. I was tired. I was alone more than usual. I kept a strict habit of locking the door and checking the windows before bed. The locks were old but solid. The windows had simple latches and no signs of tampering. I started taking photos of the rooms before I went to sleep, more to calm myself than to prove anything. In the morning, the photos matched what I saw. That should have been comforting. It was not. One night around 11:50 p.m., I heard a slow dragging sound above the ceiling. It came from the far corner of the living room, near the wall that faced the street. It was not loud. It was careful, like something being pulled across wood, then paused, then pulled again. My first thought was the attic, but the sound did not line up. The attic crawl did not run over that part of the house. I knew because I had checked when I moved in. The access panel only opened over the hallway and back bedroom. I stood under the sound and listened. It moved a few feet, stopped, then shifted again. No scurrying, no claws, no quick movement. I pulled up the floor plan on my phone and confirmed what I already knew. No attic space there, just ceiling, insulation, and roof. The sound stopped as soon as I moved away. I slept poorly after that. I started waking at night without knowing why. My body felt alert before my mind caught up. At 2:17 a.m. one morning, the smoke detector chirped once. Not the low battery pattern, just a single chirp, sharp and clean. It echoed through the quiet and then nothing. I lay there waiting for another sound. None came. The next morning, I found the footprint on the kitchen counter. It was near the sink, pressed into a thin layer of dust I had missed when cleaning. Barefoot, dirty, large. The toes were clear. The heel was smeared slightly, like weight had shifted there. It was not mine. I stood on the counter to compare and felt sick when my foot came up shorter and narrower. I cleaned it immediately, then regretted it. I checked every room again. Nothing else looked disturbed. No broken locks, no open windows. The attic panel screws were still tight. I checked the basement door, even though my unit was not supposed to have access. It was locked from the other side. I stopped inviting people over. I started keeping lights on at night. The dragging sound did not return, but smaller noises took its place. A soft thump from the wall behind the refrigerator. A faint scrape in the ceiling above the bathroom. Always brief. Always spaced out, never enough to point to one clear cause. I searched city records late one night because I could not sleep. Property listings, utility histories, occupancy permits. The house had never been officially listed as vacant. Not during the gap the landlord described. Not at any point in the last several years. There were no permits for major repairs. No notes about renovations. Just a continuous line of low-level utility usage that dipped but never hit zero. I dug deeper. Water usage stayed steady even when no tenant was listed. Power draw dropped but did not disappear. Enough to run lights. Enough to charge something. Enough to stay warm if someone knew how to conserve. I sat there staring at the screen until my eyes burned. I started noticing the house in a different way after that. Vents that had been unscrewed and put back slightly crooked. A loose panel behind the washing machine that hid a narrow gap in the wall. The smell made more sense now. It was not just age. It was human. Sweat trapped in insulation. Old food. Damp fabric. I found the access point by accident while cleaning the closet. The back wall sounded hollow. I pushed and felt it give slightly. Behind a thin board was a crawl space that ran between studs and opened into a wider cavity above the ceiling. It was just big enough for someone to move through if they knew where to turn. There were marks on the wood. Handprints. Grease from skin. I did not go inside. I backed away and sealed the board as best I could. I slept with a chair wedged against the bedroom door. I kept my phone charged and my keys in my pocket at all times. The final confirmation came a few days later when I left early for work and came back unexpectedly. The front door was locked. The windows were unchanged. Inside, the air felt wrong. Warmer. Used. The chair in the living room had been moved again. This time it faced the hallway. I left and did not return that night. I stayed elsewhere and contacted the city the next morning. An inspection followed. They found bedding stuffed into insulation. Food wrappers hidden in walls. A makeshift waste area sealed behind a panel near the water heater. Whoever had been there knew the house well. They knew how to move without being seen. They used the gaps the building had created over time. The landlord claimed ignorance. The city did not press hard. The person was gone by then. They likely left when I started staying away more, when the routine broke and the risk increased. I broke the lease and moved out as soon as I could. I took very little with me. I washed everything twice. The house was listed again a month later. I still think about the smoke detector chirp, how it sounded like a test, a way to see if I would wake. I think about the footprint and how it had to be placed with care to leave no other trace. I think about how close someone can live to you without you knowing if the structure allows it. The house was never empty. It just waited for someone new to arrive. 5 of us rented the lakeside cabin because it was cheap and far from everything. We wanted quiet and space and no schedules. The listing showed water 10 steps from the porch, trees pressed close on both sides, and no other cabins in sight. That part was true. The road ended half a mile back, and the last stretch was dirt and loose stone. When we arrived, the lake was flat and dark, like a sheet of glass pulled tight. The air smelled wet and cold even in daylight. The cabin was small but solid. 1 main room, a narrow kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a porch that faced the water. The windows were old and thick, the kind that distort reflections at night. There was no internet. Cell service came and went if you stood near the water. At night it dropped to nothing. We brought food, books, and enough fuel to last. We told ourselves that was the point. The first night passed without trouble. We cooked, drank a little, sat on the porch, and listened to the lake lap against the rocks. The sounds carried far. Paddle dipped somewhere across the water. A branch cracked in the woods. Nothing felt strange yet, just quiet. By the second day, 2 of them started acting tense. They said the place felt wrong. They could not explain it in a way that made sense. They slept badly. They kept looking toward the treeline. They left after lunch, saying they had work and headaches and a bad feeling they could not shake. I thought it was nerves and boredom mixing in an unfamiliar place. I stayed because I needed the quiet and did not believe in that kind of thing. The remaining 2 left that evening after a short argument about staying. They packed fast and did not look back. I watched their car disappear down the dirt road until the dust settled. The quiet closed in again. It felt deeper now, thicker without other voices cutting through it. I spent the rest of the day reading and cleaning up. I locked the doors out of habit, even though it felt unnecessary. The cabin sat close to the water, close enough that waves brushed the rocks under the porch. The woods came right up to the back wall. No neighbors, no lights across the lake. When the sun dropped, the dark came fast. That night, alone, the sounds felt sharper. The lake shifted tone with the wind. The trees whispered and then fell silent for long stretches. I went to bed early with a book and a lantern. I slept in short pieces, waking often without knowing why. Around 1:30 a.m., I woke to heavy steps along the shoreline. Not splashing, not quick. Slow movement through wet sand and shallow water. A step, a pause, then another step. Each pause felt deliberate, like whoever it was listening. The sound moved parallel to the cabin, not toward it. It stayed close enough that I could track it without seeing anything. The steps stopped for long moments, then continued. I lay still and counted breaths. I told myself it was someone fishing at night, someone walking the shore to check lines or nets. The steps were too slow for that, but I held on to the thought. The sound drifted out of range and then came back again, closer this time. At 2 a.m., the front door handle turned once. Slowly. No knock, no rattle, just pressure and release. The lock held. I sat up in bed and listened. Nothing followed. No footsteps on the porch. No movement away from the door. Just the lake and the wind. I stayed awake until dawn with the lantern on and my shoes beside the bed. When the light finally came up, it was thin and gray. The lake looked the same as always. Calm. Ordinary. I waited another hour before stepping outside. The sand along the shore was damp and smooth where the water had receded. There were impressions starting near the edge and moving along the shoreline. Bare feet. Large. The toes were long and spread wide. The stride was uneven, the distance between steps too far apart to be a normal human gait. The heels dug in deep, like the person leaned forward as they walked. Some steps angled toward the water, others toward the trees. It looked like someone pacing while thinking, not traveling with purpose. I followed the prints for a short distance. They did not circle the cabin. They stayed close to the water. At one point, the tracks paused near the porch, then continued past it without turning up. The sand showed where the person had stood still, weight shifting from foot to foot. I did not see any shoe prints mixed in. No sign of a boat pulled up nearby. I went back inside and packed without sitting down. I left the key on the table as agreed and locked the door behind me. I drove straight through without stopping, even when my fuel light came on. The road felt longer than before. The trees leaned in close on both sides. Later, after I was home and had time to think without the lake in front of me, I went through what I knew. The tracks were human. That much was clear once the fear settled. Bare feet do not mean something unreal. People go barefoot near water. The long toes could belong to someone who never wears shoes, someone used to moving on soft ground. The wide stride could come from waders taken off, from a knee injury, from carrying weight. The heavy steps fit a person moving slowly to avoid noise, not something wild. The door handle turn was a test, not a mistake, not confusion. Someone checked if it would open and chose not to push further. They did not want attention. The pacing along the shore matched that. Waiting, listening, deciding. I called the rental company and asked about the area without explaining why. I learned later that a seasonal worker had been living off the land nearby, camping and fishing without permits, moving along the lake at night to avoid being seen. He had been warned before. He knew the cabins. He knew when they were empty and when they were not. He was reported again a few weeks after I left, closer to another property. I do not talk about what I think made those tracks because people jump to the wrong ideas when you describe fear without context. I know what it was now. A person who understood isolation and used it. Someone who tested doors instead of breaking them. Someone who stayed just far enough away to listen and decide. The cabin did not feel wrong because of the place. It felt wrong because someone else was using it in a way that was quiet and careful. I left because I understood that by morning. I do not regret it. Quiet is only peaceful when you are the only one choosing it. I moved into the small apartment on the edge of town because it was the only place I could afford after my last lease ended. The building was older, brick and concrete, with narrow hallways and a single fire escape that rattled whenever the wind blew. The walls were thin, and I could hear the pipes hum all night. The landlord said it had been empty for a while, and that explained the smell of dust and mildew that lingered even after I scrubbed the floors. I did not mind. It was quiet, and quiet was what I needed. The first week passed without incident. I unpacked slowly, setting each item in place, and checked the apartment carefully. Locks on the doors, windows latched, curtains drawn. I told myself that being thorough would make me feel safe. The pipes groaned at night. The heater clicked and cycled. The faint smell of mildew remained, but I ignored it. It was home. The second week was when I began noticing small changes. A kitchen chair angled differently than I remembered. A cabinet door partially open that I was sure I had shut. I blamed myself, tired from work, distracted. I thought the stress was making me forget. I did not feel afraid. I felt careful, vigilant, making mental notes, checking doors and windows twice before sleeping. One night, around 11:45 p.m., I woke to a sound in the ceiling above the living room. Slow scraping, deliberate, not like rats or squirrels. The building was too old for anything like that to be routine maintenance, and the sound carried too steadily, like weight moving across a beam. I lay still, listening. It stopped, then moved again, slowly, like someone testing the floor. I checked the building plans I found online. No attic, no crawl space above that part of the apartment. Nothing should have been there. My pulse sped. I waited for the next sound, but it never came. I told myself it was probably an old pipe shifting, but the timing felt deliberate. Sleep was uneasy after that. I woke several times during the night, the same feeling in my chest, tight and pressing, that I could not explain. Around 2:17 a.m., the smoke detector chirped once. Not the low battery pattern, just a single, clean chirp, sharp, echoing in the quiet of the apartment. I froze, listening. Nothing else happened. No footsteps, no tapping, just the faint hum of the heater and the low groan of the pipes. The next morning, I discovered a footprint on the kitchen counter. Barefoot, large, dirty. The toes were long and spread, the heels smudged slightly from weight. It was not mine. I had cleaned the counter thoroughly the night before. My stomach sank. I checked the rest of the apartment. Nothing else appeared out of place. The doors were locked, windows latched, nothing stolen, no signs of forced entry. Still, the footprint could not be explained. I began noticing other signs in small, almost imperceptible ways. Slight shifts in dust on shelves. A cupboard that seemed disturbed even though I had not touched it. Marks along the baseboard that I had never noticed. The apartment felt different, tighter, closer. Something had moved through the space that was not supposed to be there. I spent days trying to rationalize it. Stress, exhaustion, imagination. Maybe I had dropped something and missed it. Maybe I had brushed against surfaces and not realized it. But the footprint and the sound in the ceiling refused to be ignored. I started checking locks repeatedly, counting windows, tracing pipes with my fingers to listen for movement. I did not touch the smoke detector after that. I left it alone, unwilling to risk another chirp. Curiosity drove me to search property records online. I found the apartment listed as vacant for months, but city records showed something different. Utility bills had not stopped. The water usage was low but consistent. Power draw never disappeared completely. Someone had been living there off the grid before me, perhaps even during my time unnoticed in spaces that were not obvious. The thought made my skin crawl, but it explained everything. The footprint, the ceiling noises, the way the apartment felt alive even when I was alone. I began to notice other small details. Vent covers slightly loosened, dust brushed aside. A hidden gap behind the washing machine. Walls that sounded hollow in places. Marks in insulation in corners I could barely reach. Evidence that someone had moved carefully, silently, through the apartment without being obvious. Someone who understood the building intimately and could occupy it without leaving the signs I would normally notice immediately. I did not enter the gaps or attempt to find the person. I stayed vigilant. Lights left on. Doors double-checked. Windows latched. The apartment felt like a space I shared with someone invisible. I could hear the pipes differently now, interpret the floor creaks differently. Every sound became a potential clue, and every shadow made me pause. Weeks passed. I avoided friends coming over. I spent evenings in the brightest room with every light on, keeping the door to the bedroom closed. I learned the rhythms of the apartment, predicting noises, counting the hours between creaks. I did not sleep well, but I did not leave either. My lease had no easy exit, and I had nowhere else to go. I told myself that awareness was enough to protect me. I told myself to remain calm. Eventually, the pattern became predictable. The noises were always minimal. Footsteps never entered rooms. The movement was only detected in the faint signs of occupation left behind. Footprints in dust, shifts in objects, small disturbances in the corners. It was careful, patient, never reckless. Whoever had been here had learned the layout, had tested the doors, had left the space mostly untouched, just enough to be noticed if someone like me was attentive. When my lease ended, I moved out quickly, taking minimal belongings. I cleaned what I could, erased fingerprints I could reach, wiped surfaces, and packed efficiently. I did not speak about it. The landlord never noticed anything. The apartment was left as I had found it, and I never returned. I did not tell anyone what I thought I had encountered. I did not feel the need to. The quiet of the space had been deceptive, and I had been careful enough to leave unharmed. Looking back, I understand what happened. The apartment had been occupied quietly, off the records, and I had become aware of it only because I noticed subtle signs that were easy to miss. The ceiling noise, the footprint, the small disturbances, all explained by someone who knew the building and used it carefully. No supernatural, no impossible. Just a person, experienced, patient, and unnoticed. The realization is uncomfortable, but it is real, and it is grounded in the ordinary. I left the space, and it was theirs again, and that was the only resolution possible.